Hey, so Dragon Ball Daima is pretty cool so far, and so is Sparking Zero. But you know what's also cool? This guy! The Majin Buu saga was something else, man. As the final section of the original material, the Buu arc holds an inevitably significant place in the Dragon Ball canon. Following the dramatic conclusion of our hero's epic conflict with the artificial humans, Roshi pops in and relays Toriyama's message to the reader that Dragon Ball will continue for just a tad longer. And in true Toriyama fashion, this marks the beginning of the longest story arc in the entire series. Now, I'm sure that many other fellow Dragon Ball fans can empathize when I say that my relationship with the Buu saga falls solidly into the category of it's complicated. If nothing else, I have to give this arc credit for ending the story with a bang. There is truly never a dull moment in these last 99 chapters, and their vitality to the franchise is undeniable once you consider the staggering amount of beloved and iconic concepts that were introduced and explored during its run, such as the Supreme Kais, the Demon Realm, the Meta Morin Fusion Dance, Patara Earrings, Super Saiyan 3? Krillin with hair? But of course, the Buu saga is certainly not without a few glaring issues. Toriyama supposedly didn't anticipate Z to last nearly as long as it did, and I get the sense that his original plan was to end it after Cell. Regardless of whether or not this is true, it's pretty obvious that he didn't come into this arc with as much foresight as he had with previous arcs when it comes to plotting and thematic conveyance. But before I get into that, perhaps we should start at the beginning. With high school. Wait, no. Okay. Oh, man. Oh, God. Okay. Hey, real talk though, this slice of life section with Gohan is way better than I think people give it credit for. The school setting is a deceptively effective environment to exemplify the key differences between Gohan and Goku now that he's taken the helm as the new protagonist of the story. Goku was a very active character, grabbing the plot by its horns and bending situations to his will. He was also incredibly simple-minded, always fighting for himself and his own values. In contrast, Gohan is a very passive character, always reacting to the plot taking place around him and choosing to fight not for himself, but for the sake of others. Gohan's interactions with Videl actually highlight both of these characteristics in one fell swoop because Videl's active position in the story forces Gohan to assume the role of the passive protagonist, all the while trying to hide his identity as the selfless and heroic Great Saiyaman. This guy gets so much unnecessary flack from the fanbase, by the way, and it's completely unjustified. The Great Saiyaman is a wonderful and endearing representation of Gohan's goodness and sense of responsibility. 11-year-old Gohan fighting Cell as a Super Saiyan 2 is amazing and it's rightfully iconic, but the circumstances that led to that achievement were cruel and unusual, and it goes against everything Gohan stands for as a person. To expect that Gohan would continue to be a badass bloodthirsty warrior into the Buu saga is frankly a naive misunderstanding of his character, and I will not stand for any further slander toward our friendly neighborhood superhero.
Yeah, I bet your training regiment's tough. Still following one, right?
Well, you see,
Okay, maybe he's gotten a little complacent. As I just mentioned, the Great Saiyaman is certainly indicative of Gohan's sense of responsibility, but by that same token, it also reveals just how misguided that sense of responsibility actually is. Gohan makes it an express priority to fulfill his responsibility to protect the innocent, but only on a small scale. This Great Saiyaman gig is great for a few lucky Metropolitans, but I think even he knows that this is far below his pay grade. Just because Earth has been able to enjoy 7 years of peacetime doesn't mean the universe won't be existentially threatened by a galaxy-busting villain in the future. And unfortunately, Gohan is going to have to learn this lesson the hard way. Of course, he deserves to live a life of peace and prosperity, enjoying the luxury of pouring all his focus into his academic passions, but even Vegeta, whose very reason to fight was stripped away from him after Goku's death, recognizes the need to stay in shape for the sake of those around him. You don't always get what you deserve. And if I can quote my 8th grade English teacher's response to my indignant insistence that my essay sufficiently conveyed everything it needed to despite being 11 sentences long and minimum word count should be abolished from the modern classroom because they are fundamentally arbitrary and unprincipled, life's not fair. And Gohan, of all people, should know that. But just because he should know that doesn't mean he should know that. Sorry, that didn't Let me explain. What I mean is that even though Gohan knows better than to slack off with his training, it's not a bad thing that he did from a storytelling perspective, because it creates for an interesting flaw for Gohan to overcome now that he's become the titular character of the story. Now, the way in which he overcomes it, and even whether or not he ultimately overcame it at all, is admittedly questionable, but that's a topic for a little bit later. For now, I want to talk about the tournament that reunites the key players of this arc and sets the conflict in motion. Now, if you've seen my video about the Tenkaichi Budokai, you'll know that I hold these Strongest Under the Heavens tournaments in particularly high regard. And despite the 25th Tenkaichi Budokai's fundamental differences from the 3 tournaments that preceded in the series, I would argue that it still lives up to that standard in its own unique way. At this point, it's become obvious that the Z-Warriors have clearly outgrown this tournament. I mean, if we're being real, they honestly outgrew it ever since Piccolo showed up, and fittingly, he's the one who points out that the soul of the contest has long since faded. Toriyama knew full well that from a physical combat sense, the World Martial Arts Tournament could never possibly achieve the same level of stakes that it once had, because of a little thing called power creep. Or perhaps power sprint would be a term more befitting in Dragon Ball's case. In any event, this tournament arc is very self-aware, and it's not trying to be anything more than it is. I think it does a great job of making the most of its potential, and what it lacks in action and martial arts, it makes up for with dynamic interactions and suspenseful intrigue. This setting is used for the fateful reunion of all of our favorite characters, including Son Goku himself, thanks to Toriyama's tasteful callback to Uranai Baba's abilities, as well as some new characters that have been introduced since the defeat of Cell. Of course, we've technically met Trunks before, but only the battle-worn, life-weary version from the Dark Timeline. This kid has never heard the word struggle, much less experienced it, and his personality perfectly reflects that. He's immature and mischievous, and he represents the unique opportunity to explore how the same person would develop differently with different upbringings. And his partner in crime, Goten, is a character in Dragon Ball. You know, something I find interesting is that Toriyama made sure to make each member of the Son family decidedly distinct from the next. The informal and daring Goku is a foil to his mild-mannered and academic son Gohan, and in order to avoid personality similarities between these two and Goten, Toriyama opted for the remarkably efficient solution of just not giving him a personality to begin with. But getting into the actual tournament itself, I did very much enjoy the intriguing mystery surrounding Shin and Kibito. Piccolo's surrender gives us a preliminary taste as to just how absolute his universal authority really is, and the fact that he's actually humbled later on by the mortal Saiyans and doesn't turn out to be all that powerful compared to the major players in this arc is a classic humorous subversion by Toriyama. I also love the foreshadowing that the Goku and Vegeta matchup implies. The fact that they were paired together in the first round lets the reader know that there's probably something brewing underneath the surface that's much bigger than this tournament. These natural suspicions are somewhat fulfilled by the absolutely brutal fight between Videl and Spopovich, which is relentlessly upsetting in every conceivable way, until things take a turn for the worse when Gohan's energy is siphoned away. At this moment, everything is thrown into question as our heroes are forced to pursue Spopovich and Yamu in the hopes of preventing the awakening of the true antagonist of this arc, who is finally revealed to us through the Supreme Kai, Majin Buu. The thing that I like about Majin Buu is that he is so fundamentally different from the other 3 main villains of Z. Vegeta, Frieza, and Cell share the common motivation of achieving ultimate power. They all seem to have this superiority complex that defines most of their conflicts with the main cast, and they will stop at nothing to validate that superiority. Majin Buu, on the other hand, has no such pride. He simply destroys because that's how he was taught to lead his life. He has nothing to prove, and therefore just submits himself to being a mindless murder machine under the control of Babidi because he's never known anything more than that. Majin Buu's innocence makes him appear as a harmless bubblegum friend on the outside, but his chaotic whimsy and lack of remorse make him a terrifying, unpredictable force of nature. But it's not just his disposition that makes him an interesting villain, it's also the way he came to be. Majin Buu's awakening is essentially the culmination of a series of mistakes made by the main cast. Similar to how Cell was able to reach his perfect form because of the main character's mistakes, Majin Buu is eventually able to break out of his egg as a direct consequence of Goku and Vegeta's personal conflict with each other, followed by Gohan's weakness. Also similar to Cell, some of the, Z-Warriors are eventually manifested through Buu's later transformations, quite literally haunting the heroes of the story with their own past mistakes. But speaking of mistakes, Oh hey Vegeta! In all seriousness, this whole arc that Vegeta goes through, starting with the regression of relinquishing control to Babidi right up to his infamous sacrifice against Buu, is perfectly executed. It was definitely something that needed to be addressed, seeing as how Vegeta's moral position in the plot has been rather nebulous ever since, well, the Ginyu Force, frankly, and I have to say that his character arc is wrapped up quite nicely over the course of this sequence. I genuinely wouldn't change a thing about it. And the fact that he was willing to fuse with Goku later on and even admit that he's the superior warrior is proof that this redemption truly stuck. Alright, I don't care if he's going to hell. That's Vegeta 2, Goku 0. By the way, can I just point out something I haven't really heard anyone address before? Whenever they gather the Dragon Balls and wish people back to life with Shenron, why do they still think Gohan is dead? They clearly noticed his ki disappear before they made the wish, so if he did die just as they assumed, then he would have been resurrected by the wish. I don't know, it's probably just a minor plot hole, but maybe someone in the comments can let me know if I'm missing something here. Anyway, that's neither here, and it's certainly not there. Something I noticed upon rereading this arc that I found particularly fascinating is that once Majin Buu expels all of his hatred and goes through the logistical nightmare that is his transformation into Super Buu, his personality undergoes a tonal shift into something more consciously sinister. Before now, his acts of destruction were rather random and seemed to be on a whim, but now that his anger has been quite literally concentrated, everything he does is a lot more measured and premeditated. It just goes to show how fluid of a cosmic being Majin Buu really is, and I think this tonal shift is quite expertly conveyed by the things he chooses to turn his victims into. Ever since Van Zant shot B, Super Buu stopped screwing around with chocolate and started killing people in more brutal ways, as depicted through the implosion of Smitty, the eggification of Chi-Chi, and, you know, the extinction of the human race.
Here, catch!
Okay, to be fair, that toss was dog water, but Gohan still should have caught it. Getting back to the fluidity of Buu, though, if you've spent any amount of time in Dragon Ball's occasionally cancerous power scaling community, you're likely aware of the age-old debate surrounding which form of Buu is actually the most powerful. If you want my opinion, I actually think that from a pure power level perspective, Kid Buu is actually one of the weakest, and I personally think that's perfectly in line with the vibe of this arc as a whole. The Buu saga is all about both sides scrambling to gain the edge and throwing everything they possibly can at each other until one side runs out of options. The fact is, both sides of this conflict are already past their peak strength. For the good guys, their peak strength was Vegito, and for Buu, his peak strength was after he absorbed Gohan. The fact that Goku and Buu are both at the weakest they've been since the beginning of the arc during their final fight is actually a nice change of pace from how these climactic battles have gone in the past, and it's extremely fitting of the dynamic that's been prevalent for the majority of this saga. Both sides of the conflict are battered and fatigued from everything that's happened over the course of the arc, and they're both on their last legs, making one final push to claim victory over the other. The fact that the Earth itself is completely destroyed is a harrowing indicator of just how high the stakes have risen, and it's a desperate battle for the fate of the galaxy, truly worthy of being the final fight of this legendary manga series. With that, the Genki Dama finally worked, and it's all thanks to Mr. Satan's Riz. Now, before I get into what I believe to be the biggest issue with this arc, I want to quickly address something that I've often heard others cite as a major flaw with the Buu saga, which is Gohan's training to reach his ultimate form. I can see why it seems lame to a lot of Dragon Ball fans, but if you'll indulge me, I'd like to play devil's advocate here. First of all, everything that leads up to this is comedic genius. The fact that the only reason the Z-Sword is hard to pull out is because it's literally just super heavy is a hysterical subversion of the classic Excalibur myth, and the character of Old Kai is priceless, despite the fact that he perpetuates the need for every single old man in shonen anime to be a massively perverted scumfuck. Nonetheless, I think this mystic ritual, while not being the most stimulating thing in the world to witness, actually makes a lot of thematic sense for Gohan in particular to experience. After becoming complacent with his training for the past 7 years, Gohan has to learn the lesson that even during peacetime, he needs to stay sharp for the sake of everyone he cherishes. And that takes time. Time that he could have been using to help everyone on Earth that's currently risking their lives fighting Majin Buu, but instead has to be sent sitting in place, not able to do a single thing, while he compensates for his lack of preparation. But I digress. As promised, I'll finally get into my biggest problem with the Buu arc, and that is thematic inconsistency. From the very start of this saga, it's pretty obvious that one of its major themes that takes front and center is passing the torch to the next generation. Not only is there a literal change of protagonists, but Goku says himself after his first fight with Majin Buu that this isn't his fight to win. And what makes this theme especially interesting is just how unprepared the next generation really is. Trunks and Goten are unbelievably talented warriors, and their potential is seemingly limitless when you consider their fusion capabilities, but at the end of the day, they're just a couple of kids. And Gohan probably has the most potential of them all, but after neglecting his training for so many years, not even a mystical power boost from a Supreme Kai could prepare him for Majin Buu's absorption tactics. It's an excellent theme to explore for this kind of story, and it would have lived up to that excellence if the next generation were actually able to overcome their unpreparedness. But instead, Toriyama realized that Gohan wasn't fit for that role, and he took a complete 180 by bringing Goku and Vegeta back into the fray and having them bail out their kids because they just couldn't handle it. It's immensely unsatisfying as a reader to watch Gohan undergo this journey of self-improvement and discovery only to be totally defeated and cast to the side so that Goku could be the hero like always. There's nothing inherently wrong with the idea of bringing Goku back and having him be the one to defeat Buu, but the fact that the entire arc up until that point was building up to the next generation having to step up and save the day makes it seem that much more clumsy and out of nowhere for Goku and Vegeta to steal the spotlight at the last minute. And yet, the undeniable truth is that I still love this story arc. Despite its glaring thematic inconsistencies, the Buu saga is still a wonderfully charming story full of amazing moments and iconic staples that will forever be inseparable from the legacy of Dragon Ball. It's a celebration of Toriyama's bombastically wacky and spontaneous writing style, as well as a grandiose victory lap that showcases all of the mystical powers and flashy transformations that the series is known for. Over the course of this grippingly turbulent, topsy-turvy conflict, the main cast threw everything in the kitchen sink at Majin Buu. And as a Dragon Ball fan, I wouldn't trade any of it for the world. After all, sometimes the kitchen sink is the very thing that makes us keep coming back to this fantastical tale time and again. And other times it's Krillin's hair.